What's up, my friend? Welcome back to another video. So today, let's take a look at a brand new string library that has just come out this past week called LUX Orchestral Strings from Sonuscore. And if you don't know Sonuscore, they're very well known for libraries such as the Orchestra Complete and the Score, among many others. But these are libraries essentially made for the media composer who wants to get up and running really quickly with film scoring or, getting sketches of orchestrations out in a very timely manner. And so it's really cool to see them expand into a full-fledged orchestral library with dedicated sections like the strings. And now, of course, I want woodwinds and brass and stuff, but just starting with a string library is a great way to go, just like Cinemax Studio strings, right? For example. And you can see I put them pretty close to each other because I tend to bunch my workhorse libraries kind of close together in the context player view window. But anyway, let's kind of get into the library a little bit. I'll share with you the basic articulations, like sort of what it comes with, and then go into more of the specialized things that makes this library stand apart. We'll take a listen to the mic positions, all the different patches, stuff like that. And then at the end, I'll share with you how I might personally use this library and share a little demo cue that I wrote in a few minutes just to share with you how it sounds in action. So firstly, if you open the library here in the contact window, you see it's a very simple folder structure, right? We have the individual sections, Violins 1 and Violins 2, Violas, Celli, and basses, along with a string ensemble patch as well, as you would normally expect from quite a few orchestral libraries out in the market. Then if you want the individual articulations from any of these patches, they have a singles folder that also expands into the individual sections, and you can see all the different articulations they've recorded here for this library, which is cool to see. And naturally, that would save you CPU processing power, right? Rather than loading the entire multi-patch with all the articulations and functionality loaded in. So let's kick things off with Violins 1. This is what it looks like out of the box. First of all, I really love the GUI and how simplistic it is. If you've watched my channel for any length of time, you know that I tend not to love libraries that are overly complicated with tons and tons of knobs and faders and things like that. So this is sort of a welcome visual GUI for me. And, with the key switches for articulations on the very bottom, sort of what you would expect from a bread and butter library. Let's have a listen to the legato first off for the Violins one here. All right, so that is the legato patch out of the box. So just a couple of first impressions here. Sound-wise, to me, it reminds me a lot of a library that I used to use quite a bit, and that is the Berlin Strings library from Orchestral Tools. I used it back in the day when it was still made for Contact, and this library has sort of a similar vibe to it. It's not quite as bright as Berlin Strings, but it has sort of a creamier sound to it. In terms of the overall playability, it certainly matches Berlin Strings, I would say, as well. The only thing is that this library does have quite a significant delay when you're playing. So, for example, if I play, right, even just a single note here, if I play a G, right, you notice how when I play the contact note here on the keyboard, there's maybe about half a second or quarter of a second where there's a bit of a delay and then the note comes in. So just keep in mind that this is one of those engines that takes its time to respond to your playing. The scripting allows for a bit more forgivability, yes, which is not even a word, but just know there's a bit of delay in the timing of the notes here, especially for the sustains. Now, if you do want to go with the look ahead mode, which you can see here is minus 250 milliseconds, then you can actually turn that on, and it allows you to quantize all your notes to the grid exactly as it is. And then you go into whichever DAW you're using and set the delay to minus 250 milliseconds. And that will help you compensate for that delay. I think there's a few other libraries on the market that also have the look ahead functionality. One that comes to mind is Tokyo Scoring Strings from Impact Soundworks. So it's cool to see more libraries using sort of a look ahead function, sort of compensating for delay, making the performance more believable, stuff like that. So this is a cool function to have as well. But I think most of the time we're going to be using, the live or real-time playing. But just so you know, the legato is a bit more on the delayed side, which is not a deal breaker, but it will make performing your lines in live a little bit trickier. So you'll just have to adjust the notes manually by pulling them a bit earlier or using that negative delay function. Okay, let's go through these other articulations and then we'll expand a little further. Right, the tone is gorgeous. Like it really sounds full and lush, like it's recorded in a big concert hall or at least a medium-sized scoring stage. It definitely has that resonance to it, which is beautiful for these strings. One thing I forgot to mention is that the dynamic range is quite wide, right? And I believe they recorded 4 dynamic layers for the sustains and the legato. So from very, very quiet whisper, like pianissimo sustains, all the way up to a triple fortissimo, they call it, with a lot of vibrato and passion in there. Not quite as vibrato heavy as something like CSS, for example, but it does strike a good middle ground, similar to, again, Berlin strings from Orchestral Tools. All right, let's go through these other articulations a little quicker here. So here's Mercado. Right, and portamento is one of those articulations that you definitely don't want to overuse within a single phrase. So the best way to use portamento, honestly, is to mix and match that with legato. So maybe you write a melodic line with 95% legato, and then that one moment where you want that extra bit of emotion in the line, then you bring in the portamento transition. So for example, starting with legato. Right, maybe for a larger interval or a moment of climactic tension, then the portamento makes it seem really, really emotional, like you're striving towards that high note there. So this is the basic set of core articulations, as you can see right here. Now, it looks very simplistic, right? But we're only scratching the surface because this is just the core articulation set, and there's many other articulations that come with this library. So let's take a look here. Let's click core articulations and see how there's these sort of preset sets of articulations. If we click short articulations, now we have a whole bunch of short ones, and including others that we haven't seen just yet. So let's play a few of these. Right, so that they have these trill figures, sort of like up and down and then down and up. This reminds me a lot of orchestral string runs from Orchestral Tools, their very, very first library, I believe. So it's really cool to see that here. And then same idea when you click on long articulations, they give you all these different articulations that you don't get in the core set of articulations. So let's hear a couple of these here. Yeah, I love that they recorded the softer dynamics with some of these articulations as well. Like in dedicated patches, as you can see, soft motion, soft trills, stuff like that. Now, where it gets really interesting is when you get into the scoring presets. So they bring you articulations that are dedicated to these specific styles of music. So if you want to write an action cue, bringing in this preset of articulations is pretty cool, right? You get marcatos, forzando, so you get a really emphatic sustain. Now, just between the marcato and the sforzando seems to have a bit more of a biting attack to it. So this reminds me of like some performance samples libraries where the marcato patch almost doubles as an accented staccato patch. So you can play heavy on your keyboard and play short notes, and you get those really accented sort of staccatos. And then if you hold the notes down, it lengthens into a full sustain, and then in this library it naturally cuts off, right? So. Right, and then the players naturally release their note there. So the marcato seems like a more general purpose one where it's not maybe quite as biting of an attack, and the sforzando is more of an exaggerated accent on these on these notes, at least for the initial portion of those notes. Let's take a look at maybe the mystic scoring here. See what articulations it loads up here. So the whisper sustains, you might expect a very, very quiet approach. Let's see. Now that's a cool articulation right there, right? Having harmonics, but with legato recorded up to a major second. So whether it's a minor second or a major second, you get that slight portamento slide between those different harmonic notes. Very, very cool. Not a lot of libraries will do that. Let's hear some harmonics tremolo, another quite unique articulation. Right, so definitely it kind of fits into that mystic vibe for sure. Let's maybe have some of these special textures here. Let's see. Give it a second. All right, so some familiar articulations. Soft motion we've already heard, soft interval trills, but let's maybe hear these slow bends here. right? So that's a really cool one because essentially I'm just holding a sustain, and as soon as I release my fingers, then it bends downwards. So that's a very responsive articulation that feels really good to play as well. So you can see we're only scratching the surface here, but there are so many unique articulations, not just the core ones with this library. And let's maybe finish off here with the Virtuoso runs, see what happens. All right, let's hear some of these runs. Right, so these runs here, especially these scalar runs, remind me a lot of Cinestrings runs from Cinesamples, or built off the Hollywood Winds concept that they came up with really, really early on. So this is like multiple libraries in one, essentially, and the pricing, I think it's like $500 for everything that you get here already, is quite justified, especially if you don't have a full-fledged string library yet. I think this one covers a lot of ground, even just looking at this very first patch. All right, so that is the, just by looking at these articulation sets, you can see that they are grouped into different moods, different shorts or longs, but that's just the very beginning, because let's say you want to blend articulations together, right? Maybe you're playing one single articulation, but then you want to go into another one seamlessly. LUX allows you to do that as well. And this is done through this SAT system, and I forgot exactly what it stands for, smooth articulation transition, maybe. And essentially what it does is, like, you can play a single note and then key switch to another articulation, and it will blend into that articulation, essentially. So let's try this out. Let's play a note starting with legato, and then I'm going to transition to tremolo through the key switch. Right? So this is a very, very unique functionality. I mean, the only library that I think comes similar or comes close to doing something similar is like Sunset Strings from Realitone. Mike does a great job with his libraries, very innovative, lots of cool features. So this library definitely reminds me of that as well. Maybe let's go to the long articulation set specifically to see this a bit more clearly. So let's play some sustains and then fade into flautando through the key switch. Isn't that just super cool? I mean, I literally don't know of any other library that does something like this. It's amazing. So I think it's the rate at which it switches into the new articulation depends on how hard you play the key switch. So if you play the key switch really, really lightly, then it takes a bit more time easing into the subsequent articulation. Whereas if you press harder, then it kind of goes into the new articulation quicker, I believe. So that is the SAT system. Very, very cool. And it allows you to basically hold a single note or a chord and go between different colors and different textures just by key switching with your left hand, right? So lots and lots of possibilities there, which is amazing to see. Now, if you want to switch around the articulations yourself, like let's say you like the chord articulation set, but maybe instead of marcato, you want the sforzando. So you can either click this magnifying glass, or you can go into the find menu to look for that articulation. Let's say we just use the magnifying glass here. So we go to Mercado, click the magnifying glass, and then here I'm going to look for the, I think it's under the shorts. Let's see, there it is, Sforzando. So you can double click that. And now you can see instead of Mercado, it's now Sforzando. So yeah, it sounds like that. Right, that's one way you can customize all the different articulations according to what you want. So let's say the SAT system, it works really well, right? You kind of go between two different articulations very easily. But let's say you want to use the Modwheel to go between those instead. This is where the articulation morphs come into play. So far we've only been using the classical articulations. The articulation morphs essentially assigns two different articulations to the Modwheel. So for example, let's take a look at spiccato with Bartok pits at different positions in the wheel. So at the bottom of the Modwheel, we have spiccato, but as we push up, right at the top of the wheel, we got the Bartok pits. So maybe let's use some longs here to illustrate that a bit better. Maybe sustain to minor second trills. So at the bottom of the Modwheel, we'll hold a chord. Lots of flexibility there as well, right? And that in itself is really, really cool to see. Now, if you want to finesse that even further, you can go into the edit window and change the parameters of which, you can control the speed, the Modwheel position from where the articulation actually comes in. So let's see, if we click here, the trill, right? We can have it start a little bit later or come up to entirely trill at the very top of the Modwheel rather than, more at the 70% mark. It starts to get a bit more technical in this tab because you can really fix the nuances as much as you like for the Modwheel stuff. But I think for me, most of the time, I'd either be just switching with or sticking with the morphs articulations, using the preset positions on the Modwheel, or using the SAT system where I just hold a certain note and then use the key switches to go between different articulations there. All right, let's really quickly talk here about the different mic positions as well. So by default, you get the full mix, which is a blend of the close, tree, and far. And then they also give you bleed microphones, which is quite unique to this library as well. And so I think what it is like, in addition to the regular microphones they put up for the strings, they also put 20 additional microphones around the rest of the orchestral sections, at least like where they would be sitting. So in addition to the isolated string section sound, you can also get the perspective from the rest of the orchestra or from the rest of the string sections, right? Where on Violins 1, so you can get the string sound from the Violins 2 perspective, the Violas perspective, cellos, double basses, etc. So it creates a more full, rich sound as well. So let's just hear these individually first. Let's start with the close mic here, and then go to tree, far, and then the bleed. Right, let's see what it sounds like if we bring in the tree mic to start with, and then we bring up the bleed mic a bit at a time. right? So it definitely adds like a fullness and just a more full-bodied sound to it, which I really liked. Now, sort of similar to Berlin strings as well, I do find that the tree mic position definitely sounds very good because it's a good balance between the close detail in the sound, but also, having the room included in there as well for the natural reverb. But 9 times out of 10, if a library includes a full mic position, sort of a pre-built mix, I tend to use that very, very often. And I do think the full mix mic sounds great as well. Okay, couple other things here. I know we're spending a lot of time on Violins 1, but I think it's just, you using the first patch of the box to demonstrate all these features is worth it. 2 other things to find here at the very bottom. We have a sordino emulation. So let's hear that. Beautiful. A bit more of a thinner sound there. And another really cool thing, especially for melodic phrases, is the AVA button, which adds an octave above the note that you're playing. Right, sounds very, very seamless, just like if you had 2 violin sections playing in an octave apart. And right now, the library that I'm using for octave violins is Metropolis Arc 1. So it's really cool to see a flagship library like this have that functionality to include an octave anytime you want in the patch. So that is the Violins 1. Let's kind of run through these other sections a little quicker. Let's start with Violins 2 and have a listen to the legato here first. All right, and let's move on to the violas, starting with the legato as well. All right, so a nice creamy full sound here for the violas as well. Now, one thing I want to quickly mention is that if you want to play faster passages, I think this library does excel more in the slower to medium speed in terms of phrasing. But if you want to play faster lines, you just want to make sure that you don't hold the notes too long. So you definitely want to overlap the notes to trigger the legato. But if you hold the notes too long, the engine kind of messes up a little bit and it sort of dissipates your entire line, as you heard earlier in the demo. So basically, if you're playing, let's say, a 5-finger scale, da 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 da, you want to make sure those initial fingers come off pretty quickly, letting that last note sing. Otherwise, if I keep holding the initial notes, this is what happens. Right, it kind of like stumbles a little bit. So you can either, you can just play in the part in your DAW and then make sure you edit the notes so that they're not overlapping too long and stuff like that. But just so you know, if you're freestyling, be very careful when playing fast passages. I wouldn't say this is the fastest library in terms of the fast passages, but it can play decently fast as you could just heard. So Just be careful of that little thing there. Let's move on to the Celli here. Have a listen to this. Right, so you can hear above a certain range there, the AVA basically stops. So yeah, you can sort of keep your melodic phrase in mind when using the AVA functionality there. Okay, let's hear some of these other articulations as well. Maybe we'll switch the mercato here to the sforzando. So let's go to shorts, sforzando, there we go. All right, then we have the double basses as well. All right, so you might notice that here that the double basses are a little bit more slurred in terms of the legato transitions. And this could have very well been a deliberate choice because, you know, usually as the instruments in the orchestra go lower and lower, they tend not to play too many fast passages anyway, because the higher things are, the easier it is for it to resonate in the hall, and you can really hear the detail in the sound really keep up. But when you go lower and lower, the sound tends to get a little bit muddier, right? So maybe this patch was designed with slower passages in mind, allowing the player to accentuate each of the transitions a bit more, rather than speeding through them and making it sound like almost no legato at all. Just a little quick thing here, I noticed in at least my copy of the library, in the higher dynamic here, the highest dynamic of the E and the F3, there's a bit of dissonance there, right? So the E has a bit of an F with it as well, and the F has a bit of an F sharp in it as well. All the other notes seem totally fine to me. And that's something that could be easily fixed in an update for sure. But that's just something I noticed when playing around with the library really quickly. Oh, by the way, the articulation combis are where you have both the articulations layered together at the same time. So for example, staccato plus pizzicato, you're going to hear both the staccato sample and the pizzicato together. I think that is an interesting combo because the staccato tends to be on the shorter side, but the pizzicato allows the sample to ring out a little bit more. So it's almost like a more resonant staccato, this combo right there. So lots of possibilities you can see. All right, let's wrap it up with the string ensemble patch. Now, unlike most ensemble patches, this is not just putting all the instruments together, but this is actually like your AI orchestrator. Like basically the engine realizes what chords you're playing and orchestrates it across the entire string section depending on the style of voicing that you're going for. So by default, we have polyphonic basic. Let's have a listen to that. Beautiful, right? Let's try another voicing style here. So let's do polyphonic wide. All right, let's see. Yeah, so one thing about using this legato patch is that they stress in the walkthrough not to overlap the notes, even though it's a legato patch for this ensemble patch. So that's sort of why it seemed to stutter a little bit. I think it's because I was just overlapping the notes a little bit while I was transitioning from one chord to another position. So if I make sure that I let go of the first notes before playing the next notes, it will help the engine sort of realize the voicing that I'm going for, or the position of the chord I'm going for, and then voice it accordingly. Let's have a listen to this melodic unisono. And yeah, let's see. All right, take that to the next step with melodic octaves. As you can see, the 8v8 buttons turn on here as well. Yeah, so I really like how the engine is very intelligent, right? It essentially takes the voicing style that you're going for and orchestrates it according to what it feels is the most appropriate. And that is just the voicing styles. You also have the moods, right? And the atmospheres, as we saw in the previous patches here when you click on those articulation sets. So that was just the basic. Let's have a listen to maybe action and see what it gives us. It's going to change up the articulations a little bit, right? Here we have marcato. You know what? Let's change that to sforzando, which is like, see if I can find it right there, sforzando. Let's see. Right. And of course, this is not just limited to the individual articulations, but you can add in the morphs as well. So let's bring in the long morphs and let's see what we get if we put in sustain with sol ponticello tremolo. Let's see. Right. So you get basically all the same functionality as in the individual patches, but put into this orchestrator patch, which is really cool to see. Now, of course, this is equally customizable as well. So you can go into the individual sections and change the articulation yourself. You can also activate EVA and take that off if you want. You can have the octaves go up or down depending on that individual voice. And you can have that note of the chord being played in the lowest or the middle position, the highest. All this stuff is explained in the walkthrough videos on Sonuscore's channel, by the way. All right, with all that said, let's have a quick listen to the demo I put together. It's very, very simple, just using the strings, just using this orchestra, this library. And let's have a listen, and then we'll break it down a little bit. Cool. So this is essentially just using the default settings of the library. I didn't change any of the mic positions. I didn't really change the articulation sets or anything like that. Basically, I just wanted to challenge myself to see if I could write something pretty quickly just using the default articulations there. So essentially, this intro, or the 2-bar lead-in to the main theme, was using the SAT technology, or sort of the morphing technology, right? So if we take a look, let's say at the violas, if we listen to it on its own, and solo it up, it sounds like this. Right? So if you hear that one more time, it modulates or morphs from legato to the tremolo using that SAT technology. So all I had to do was make sure that my first key switch here was on sustain. And then as that second note was about to morph in, I just did the key switch to tremolo. And then that's how we got that morphing into that second articulation there. And then I put in the key switch for spiccato right away after that. So then we get this ostinato figure, right? And sort of did that same thing for the violins too as well. So if we have a listen to them together, right? And then they do the spiccato in harmony as well. For violins 1, I essentially just wanted that longer melodic figure or longer sustained texture to counterbalance all the spiccatos that were happening. And I wanted the cello line to be the main focus, right? So if we listen to that together. Let's take away the shorts there. Right? So notice here the violins 1, I'm using the whisper legato because I want it to be a little more tame on the more piano pianissimo side before it takes over the melody in the second half. And the cello part is just using the regular legato to play that melodic figure. So let's see, the rest of the tracks here. Yeah, so here you can see I'm using pizzicato to accompany the first cello line. And then kind of with the rest of the spiccatos, it kind of creates a nice texture, I think. Right, so it kind of fills up that low mid-range. It kind of fills in the chord tones there. Now for the basses, I did something similar. Let's take a look here. I think it's just using the tremolos into the shorts. So let's take a look. Tremolo into spiccato. Now here I'm also using the 8VA functionality to get that octave sound, right? Very, very common, because without it, it would just be that low note. But it's very common for cellos to double the double basses up the octave. So this kind of simulates that functionality there. And then in the second half, we essentially have the same thing, but now the melody is transferred up to the violins. So if we have a listen to that. Now we go to the regular legato with this AVA turned on, without it. Not quite as full, right? So with it on, it just adds that high sheen, which I really like. And then the rest of it is sort of just accompanied by the shorts as usual. The shorts are actually moved up a little bit as well. You see how they're a little bit on the lower side, right? And then we move into the second half and then they go up a little bit. So it increases the energy a bit, so. Right? So then they're a little bit higher. And then the violin melody is actually counterbalanced now by the cello as well. So the cello is now playing sort of a counter melodic figure. So it sounds like this. And of course, at the very end, we did a key switch just to make sure the shorts are being activated. So I did like a staccato into the spiccato articulation, just to make sure those last 3 notes were as short as possible. And then you might be wondering about this ensemble patch right here. This was literally just to create a tremolo bed underneath everything in the second half. Tremolo you can see there. rises up. Right, and then I just used 2 short notes there at the very end to finish things off. So that's literally it. I mean, of course you can do a lot more, but this is just using the string library. If I were to add more orchestral elements, I might add percussion, like a bass drum, some timpani. I could also add some flutes, some woodwinds to counterbalance the string sound, maybe some brass, some horns in there too. But just using the string library, it can already get you pretty far. So yeah, that's essentially the library. It's really, really fun to use, honestly, because it's so simple to use as well. Again, I think simple libraries, the ones that give you enough functionality, but do it in a simple way that's presentable and playable, it gives you just so much inspiration and motivation to play with the library. And LUX is definitely one of these libraries for sure. So if you're interested in checking it out, I'll include a link to it down below in the description. And if you want to purchase the library using my link, it is an affiliate link, so that means part of your purchase will support me and the channel, which is greatly appreciated, of course. No obligation whatsoever, but just so you know, the library is down below if you want to check that out there. And of course, if you want to check out my full sample library recommendations list, the libraries that I use on a regular basis, literally every single day, not just strings, but woodwinds, brass, percussion, ethnic libraries, piano libraries, jazz libraries, all that stuff consolidated into one PDF guide. I've got my sample library buyer's guide down there as well in the description if you want to check that out too. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Big thanks to Sonuscore again for sharing a copy. Really appreciate it. And I will catch you in the next video. See you soon.